Hi, and welcome to Manny's Makings. Today we are going to talk about edging for your beadwork. And I put this as a separate video because there's lots and lots of different types of edging. And you can do modifications of each of those. It becomes your own sort of creative tool to add your own finishing touches on things. So let's go through some basics. So I'm going to get as many as I can in here and show you. So I just did a quickie little sample. You can still see strings and stuff because I wasn't carrying. This is just on Stiffened Felt. It's just a practice piece so you guys can see. So we have our brick stitch edging. So that's this first one here, and you can see the holes on the top. And then we have modified Picot edging. That's just a sort of a closer Picot edging. Then we have the clean edge, which is, you don't see the hole of the bead. You see the, it's nice and clean. And then we have um, the wrapped edge, sorry. And that one is quite simple to do as well. And I put the orange line here because I wanted to have something. If you were doing bead embroidery and you're using this piece, there's usually a line of beads to sort of go against. So I'm going to start with the brick stitch here, and I'm going to just do it on the other side. And all I have is I'm using a short needle because I like it. It's a size 11. You can use a beading needle for sure if that's what you're more comfortable with. Your needle doesn't matter as long as the size is the same. It's a 10 or 11, 12 is fine. I have some 6-pound Fireline that I have conditioned with some beeswax just to make it a little bit easier, and I put a knot in the end, and we're going to get started. So these are my two edging. This is my clean edge here on my one piece, and then this is let me just show you the Picot here. So this one has the brick stitch, and then it has the Picot put on top with smaller ones. So I consider this sort of more of a true Picot, but then there's the other modified Picot, which is fine. So let's start with the brick stitch, because from this you can do tons of things. So it's much like the brick stitch you do for regular life. So I'm just gonna get myself in focus. There we go. So you're gonna start with securing your knot, and you can go from the front to the back or the back to the front. If you're doing bead embroidery and you have the 2 layers, I tend to go between the 2 layers with a knot, and the distance that you would need to come. And I know that that's black, but I have white thread, so you should be able to see it. Now you're going to see a little bit of wax on the first couple of passes, so you can see I'm a little bit from the edge so that it's easy. I'm catching my layers, right? And then I'm going to put on 2 beads if I'm starting the first one, and I'm just using 11/0 here, and I'm just using a really contrasting color so it's easy to see. I'm going to see if I can get this better focused for you. There we go. So, and I'm going to come back about a bead's width away from my last place. So I would come around through the backing and come back up again. And I end up with these 2 beads sort of floating around on top. I'm going to come through the last one of the 2 that I put on, and I'm going to come back up through. Now, if this was the start of an edge and there was not going to be anything, I wasn't going around the whole piece, then you have to secure this other side here. If you're going to go around the whole piece, then this would be your last one that you would go into, and that would secure your last one to your first one, and that would make them all secure. If you're not going all the way around, all I do is I go back down. I go back through where I started. I come back up that bead. I go back down this bead. I go back down through here, through my second stitch. So I'm copying my stitches. And then I come back up through the second one. And that really secures this on. You may have to fiddle with it a little bit to get it to lay perfectly flat. If you pull them too tight between the 2, they don't lay perfectly flat. Let me zoom in a bit here. There we go. And you can take your needle and fiddle with it to get it to lay the way you want. Okay, so then you have your first 2 stitches. And then after that, you just do 1 stitch. And what you're wanting to do is go through the back, because that's how I'm doing this one. I'm going around this way rather than going around that way. You can go either way, whatever works for you in the situation you're in. And you come in enough, and I'm assuming there's 2 layers, and you need to be the 1 bead width from there. So I'm just going to show you here. If you want to, if you're worried about being a bead width, you can sort of take your bead and put it beside there and sort of see what that width is, and then come back up that distance. And then you come back through the bead, and you're pulling them snug together, okay? And you're just going to lay these on the top edge. Now, this can be done if you're just, let's say you have a thicker piece of hide or leather, and you're just wanting to bead the edge for some other reason. You can do this with taking less material, or even what I call backstitching. So you come through the actual top piece of the top layer of your leather like that. It's like taking a little stitch, and then you come back. Yeah, there we go. So I'm just going to put a few on here. Speed this up a little bit. And if you notice, I hold my fingers, and what that does is that actually gives me this, my needle is sort of comes across this finger every time, and it gives me the same spacing. It's sort of a habit I've developed from years of doing edge work, so that it's, and if I'm doing this on a bead embroidery piece, I wouldn't be using this thread. I would probably be using Nymo or KO or some kind of actual thread. Now you can get these 2 close together, and if you do, you're going to get, it's not going to be, see how this is laying nice and straight and flat? If you put these 2 close together, they're going to do this, and you don't want them to do that. You want them to lay nice and straight and flat. Okay, so I can continue doing this and just do a couple more because I want to show you some other options of what you can do with this. Let's see, have an odd number or an even number? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I have 10. Okay. So from this edge, as you see, my thread is coming out of the top of the bead. Perfect place to do a fringe. So let's say you have a little square of leather or a little piece of leather, and you want to, you've done this sort of stitch on the very edge of the leather, and once you have the stitch done on the edge of the leather, you're coming out of the top of the bead, you can add a fringe. You can, put on a bead, put on a bunch of other beads. You can, whatever fringe you like, and turn this into something that would hang. So you could have a little leather triangle if you wanted, with some, stamping work on it if you wanted to, whatever you're looking for, and you could turn this into a fringe. So fringes, I showed you on another video, but basically you're just going to string a bunch of beads on, and I'm just going to do one leg just to show you. So I'm just stringing a bunch of beads on, and you can make this fringe as short or as long as you want. I just want to show you how easy it is with, and I'm just going to take a little 50-no. I just have a little antique copper 50-no here at the bottom. As my turn, I'm coming back up through the beads, and then I come back up through that brick stitch. I'm going to hold on to everything. But my thread's getting caught in the corner here. There we go. And then you have a little fringe. So you could fringe something if you wanted. You could just fringe on the outside edge, on the, on the narrow edge instead of the long edge if you wanted to. So you could have some fun with that. And that's kind of fun. Another thing you can do is do a combination of bead edges. Again, it's part of your design process, so you can have as much fun as you want. I'm going to come up the next bead, and I'm going to do what I call a sort of a stop bead edge. So I'm going to take a big honking crystal here. I'm going to need something to turn around in, so I'm going to take a little 50-no. So what I have on my needle is a crystal and a 15-0. I'm going to bring this down, both of them down to the work so you can see here. And as you see, I just take my thread and put it through there to hold everything nice and tight. I'm going to avoid this first 15-0, and I'm going to come back down and through that second bead. Okay. And you get the same sort of idea as a fringe, except it's shorter. So you could have crystals on your edge, you could have fire polish hanging on your edge. And now in this case, because it's you know, a fairly decent sized bicone, I wouldn't be happy with just the one thread. So I would come back down through my stitch and the fabric. So if you want to reinforce it, and if I was going to put this on, like, you know, a fancy dress outfit, or I'm caught on something here on my beadwork on the other side, there we go. And then I would come up through the back. I wouldn't want it to fall off, so I would definitely reinforce this. So come back up, make sure I go through my 15 and back down through my brick stitch, and that's much more secure now. It's not as floppy. So, you know, you could definitely, you know, do as much as you wanted. You could do as many. Obviously, you wouldn't do them together. You would have a bunch of these, and you could do different sizes. So you could start with a small bicone and go up to the bigger bicone and go down. You could start with even with a brick stitch, you could start with a small brick stitch, bead like 11, and then go to an 8, and then a 6, and an 11, and sorry, an 8, and then a 11. From small to big to small, you got it. So that it makes like an edge like this with the brick stitch. Lots of fun. You can have as much fun as you want with that. And you can also do the same sort of thing when you do the clean edge. You could use different size beads and go up and down in size of beads to give yourself a sort of a scallopy filled edge, if you like. Okay, so here I'm going to show you, this is what I call a modified picot. So I'm just going to take it up through, I try not to catch the backing here. Take it up through the bead. I'm just going to move over a couple of beads just to get out of the way here. Sorry, not a modified. This is what I call a picot. So I take, once I've laid my brick stitch, I come back through, and I have some choices. I can do just one bead between the two, which I would just do on the first pass, which I'm going to show you to do in a second. Or you can do 3 beads, or you can do 5 beads and like do a loop. So let's show you what 3 beads looks like. So I'm just going to use them all in the darker color, and I'm going to go down the next one. So I came up one, go down the next one, and what you get is this little picot. So let me just get it. There you go. So you get this little picot, and it's sort of hides the top holes so you don't see them, and it's a wonderful way to finish things. Okay, and you could do that with, I could use, let's do another one with some bigger ones. Okay. So let's do, I'm going to come back up the next one. So if I was just doing it all with 15s, I would just come back up the next one. If I'm doing a combination, I would come back up the next one. So I'm going to do it with another 11, then a 15, and then 11. And I'm going to come back down. And you're going to see that that looks different. So you get a totally different look depending on what beads you choose to do the picot with. So if you see, you know, butterflies on the edges, this is great. It's kind of fun. So, but if you kept doing that over and over and over again, it would look like you had a double row of brick stitch with a little piece. If you want to do a loop, then you just put on, you know, 5 or more. And my recommendation is to go with an odd number. So I'm just going to do 5. And I'm going to come back down. Now, in the middle of that loop, I could put a drop bead if I wanted, or instead of the 5th one, I could put 2 and a drop bead, and then 2 more, 2 and a nib bit bead, or 2 and a flower bead, or 2 and we'll do this on the end of it, and then come back down and 2 more. the combinations, once you have this sort of brick stitch edge, of possibilities of what you could do are limitless. So I've got this other weird little thing going on beside it, so it's not wanting to lay right. So it's harder to see. See if I can move that out of the way. So then you end up with a little loop. And the bigger you loop, the more round it gets. So you can do, you know, tons more beads. So let's just pull this back up through here. See if I can do it without catching any threads. Maybe, maybe not. Yep, I got it. Yay. So that was 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Let's go with 11 and see what happens. Put it back down. Same one. And see, you get a much rounder looking. So you put a bunch of these on and you're going to have this, it's going to be fluffy looking on the outside. Okay. So that's your possibilities for your basic brick stitch. Now there's another way to do brick stitch. I'm pretty tied up, so I'm just taking my thread around the back because this is a sample piece. And let's move down a little tiny bit from there. I'm going to come through the back, just like I pretending I'm securing a fresh thread in a knot. And I'm going to do a brick stitch, but this time I'm going to go 3 beads to start. And I'm going to come back up and I'm going to grab this last one that I put on. I'm going to ignore the 15 and the other 11, and I'm going to pull. So you get a bead in the middle. Now, depending on your spacing, okay, so I'm going to show you when I do it close up first. 1, 2. So after this, sorry, you put a 15 on and an 11. So once you've done the first 3, you only need to put on the middle bead and the next bead. And if I do them 1 bead apart, like this, like I laid the normal brick stitch, I end up with, they're close together on the bottom, and I end up with this little raised piece right here. See? And that's what it looks like from the top. If I do them farther apart, so I'm going to do the next one farther apart, I'm going to take this, and so I have a 15 and another one, and I'm going to go farther apart than I should. I'm going to space them apart. You get a totally different look. See how this sort of sets? See how this one? Let me get closer here. Focus for you. Okay, this one's much closer together, and this bead sits on top. This one, the bead sort of sits in the middle. Now I'm going to show you with a crystal, and you're going to see how completely different this is. And let's pick a different crystal than that big honking one. Let's see what I got laying on my desk here. So this is just a little round fire polish, or yeah, little round fire polished, I believe, or I don't even know what it is. Doesn't matter. Okay, so I'm going to pick it up first. Looks like a rondelle. And then another 11. Okay. So I have a rondelle and another 11 on my, instead of putting in the 15. And I'm going to give it some space. And I'm going to come back up just the 11. And then I have a gem on the edge. See how that gem sits right on the edge between the two? Or I can do the same thing and go close. Sorry, gem first. My rondelle and I can go 1 bead space away and put this through. And with this one, it sits on top of the 2 11s. Now, when you do a bunch of them together, you get more security, obviously. But see how this one's a little lower and this one's a little higher? This gives me opportunities to come in here and go through the stone this way and add stuff in the middle between the two. So, you know, I call that lace edging, where you're going between the beads and then adding more beads, and you're sort of building layers of whatever you'd like. So have fun with that. All right, so there's a couple of possibilities for the brick. And so that was the first two here that I showed you, this one and this one. And now we're going to do the clean edge, which you've already seen before, but I'm going to just close that off. I'm just going to come farther over here and back up again. Now the neat thing about the clean edge is that it's always the same way. So you start at the front, so you'll lock your knot in between the two layers. If you're doing a two layers, if you're just doing one layer, you can run your knot through the top end here so that it's hidden under the bead. So you literally come down the middle of the leather and then come back out. And then that hides your knot here, which your beads are going to go over. Does that make sense? So you come down on a bit of an angle. So then as you bead your edging over top, that knot is sort of tucked inside the leather there. Okay, so I'm going to put a bead on. I'm going to go back down through the front, one bead distance away. So it looks like I'm stitching it to the front. But if I have other beads there, this is going to work better. And I'm going to take this and go up. Okay? And this edging is meant to do where you continue on and connect. Okay? And then I got another bead on. I'm going to go back down one bead away. Again, it looks like I'm laying it on the front. And put it up. Okay, and you want them to lay sort of side by side. And as you can see, the holes are the other way. The holes are that way. They're not the same as they are on the brick stitch, which you can't see anymore. Same as these ones. See how the holes are to the top? These holes are this way. Show you one more time. You come, take a bead, go back down one bead to the front, width away. I tend to get my needle in early, and if it's, my bead can lay on the wrong side of my thread. So you just take it and twist and bring it out. There, so I have 3 on like that. And I would just continue to do that. Now this one you can do in different size beads as well. You can start with your, you know, your little 15s and then go to 11s and then 8s and then 6s and then a rondelle if you want, and you know, whatever, you can go up as high as you want and back down as you want, and it creates this sort of sculpted up and down edge. If you want, you can especially if you can change colors with this one really easily as you follow along your pattern. I didn't do it with this one, but let's say on this one here I had pink all on the edge, but let's say I had green on the edge here. I could have done green in this section right here. This little section here could have been green beads. Then I could have done a white bead and then some more green beads and then a white bead and some more green beads. And then I could, you know what I'm saying? If this comes right to the edge, I could have done red beads right here, so that it looked like this, the edge just falls off the bracelet, which is really cool depending on what you're making. So, you know, and this one here, I have the one row and it's all cream around the edge anyways. So, you know, I could have done it cream and it could have looked like it's just another row of beads um, on my piece. So yeah, so just give you some examples. And what it looks like when you have a bunch of them is this. And what I tend to do is when I'm done and I come back to the beginning and I come through this first one, and I showed this on my last video. So if you want to see that, you can go to my last video. I show you how to finish the row. I tend to run my needle through the beads this way. Okay. And even with this one, you can actually, you know, if you wanted to, you could come up in between, stick a little bead. I don't know why you would do it this way if you wanted to, but I mean, there's possibilities. You can, you know, loop around a couple of them and do some fun other things. Again, imagination is the only thing that can hurt you. So normally I have to have another line of beads. So the line of beads on this one, on the rolled edge, as you can see, sort of support um, your beads. Tends to be done on either just end sort of raw edge leather that's quite thick, or it gets done on beaded piece. This often gets done on a beaded piece, and the more you do, the sort of tighter and nicer it fits. So, you know, if you have a whole pile like this is the whole edging looks like this. And it's, I don't have a piece right now that I can show you, so I can't show you what it looks like, but this is what it looks like from the top, from the side view. Um, and it's not that bulky. As you can see, it just sort of wraps around the edge. It's a great way to protect the edge. It hides all your sins on the edge if you need to. Yeah, so let's move the needle over and I'll show you how to do the rolled edge. Now with the rolled edge, you can do it on a little amount or a lot amount. You can do your loops as any size you want, and you can even graduate your loop sizes up. So I'm coming in sort of the normal distance from the edge. So if I had bead embroidery here on all this piece, we're going to use our imaginations. I would then, you know, can do my rolled edge as putting the two pieces together. So I come up from the back with a knot. We're going to pretend that's what I just did. So I'm up and I'm ready to go. So I've got a wider piece, so I'm sort of scrunching up to hold. So now the deal with this is you can do it with 3 beads, but what ends up happening is you end up having one sit here, one on the edge, and one sit on the back. And it sort of looks like a point. And you can see the hole often of the one that's on the top. So 5 is sort of the minimum number. So just 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I got my 5 beads. And you're just going to come from the back to the front. And I tend to come up, you know, 1 bead space away. And you have to sort of take it and pull it, and it wraps the edge. Now see how I can still see the holes a little bit? That's your choice. You can do a combination of beads if you want to do that, or you can do more beads. With these ones here, I did 7. And as you see, you can't see the holes as much because I did 7. So your choice of what you want to do. So let me show it to you, and I'll do another row like this. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And I'm going to put it up 1 bead away. Now this one is really important. You sort of stay 1 bead away, and that your thread comes up the same distance from the here to the edge, here to the edge, here to the edge every time. Otherwise, you're not going to get nice consistent pieces. See, and it looks the same on the back. It's nice and consistent, and this just covers the edge. Okay, so I'm going to move over a little bit, and I'm going to show you with the 15s what it looks like. And I come down too far here, so I'm going to, sorry, that's way too much material. I'm going to need like 15 beads to cover it. Okay, come back up closer to the edge. Okay. And my tail's getting wrapped around it, the main thread. That's the one thing about Fireline is that the tails, when you have the threads doubled up, tend to do that. So hence why I wax it. All right, so I got my thing here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And you may have to do 1 to figure out the right amount of beads, but now these ones would have to be really close together. But see how it makes a much tighter little one? It's kind of cool. So let me do one with 2, 3, 4, 5. I'm starting and ending with an 11. So there's my pattern. So I have 5 of the 15s in between. And I'm going to do another one. And then I have that going on. Now they don't lay as tight together because now the 11's bumping that out. But let's do another one. One with the 15s beside that. 1, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Come on. Silly 15s don't want to get on my needle. There we go. Now in traditional native beadwork from years back, we didn't have 15s. So all our beading was done on 11s, 10-0s and 11s, and then shell beads and things like that. So you can see that that gives it a completely different look Let me just bring this up. That has a completely different look. And obviously I wouldn't use white thread with these beads. I would use a black thread because I'm on black material and my beads are dark. But see how that gives a completely different look? It's kind of fun. So, you know, you can see that on a nice, you know, done some darker metal tones, you know, antique copper and brass and stuff, beadwork, and then, you know, or even some of this turquoise color and together, and then I do this as my edging, and it would look like a little square around the edge, even though it's rounded. It would look beautiful. Take a lot of beads. This is the most bead intensive method of doing your edging. Okay. So let's go over what we talked about again today. We talked about the brick stitch. We talked about, I call this a modified brick stitch, where I add one in between. And as you can see, I did the ones close together, and then I did ones spaced out. And you can see the differences between the two. Come on. There we go. And then I did the clean edge. So you can see what that looks like. And the spacing has to be really good on this one, or you end up with like weird gaps. That's not even tied on anymore. There we go. Then I did a rolled edge. And this one is, if there was beadwork here, you would just put the needle, you know, come around up, right up beside the beads, and so that it hugs the beadwork and hides your raw edge. And then we did, on the brick stitch, we did some modified options. So we started with, we could do a fringe. Yay, just the one here, but you'd have a bunch of them. And then we did what I call a stop stitch, and you could do this on top of your material as well as doing it on here. And I doubled it up so you can see that you can make it quite strong. And then I did what I call a traditional picot. And then I did another style of picot with different beads. And then I did, well, that's kind of cool. I could reinforce that and go between, ignore that top bead, and you'd have that shape. So, you know, you got yourself a loop. It's not wanting to stay as a loop, but there you go. You have yourself a loop. You could do this and make it like a fuzzy edge, because you have a bunch of them. Yeah, and if you do these rolled edges, you can do them really big loops and just make them all sort of furry hanging things. It's fun. You can, as I said, you can get creative. I think what happens with this kind of stuff, this bead edging, is that people know the brick stitch and they think that's all you can do with it. But there's, you know, there's 1, 2, 3. If you count the brick stitch itself as 4, another one is 5. That's 6. And then the combinations of this is 7. You know, another one is 8, where they're spread farther apart with a different color bead. There's, you know, 20, 30 different, more than that, ways that you can just play with this basic stitch, and then all the things you can do with it. Launch from it. Rolled edge, same thing. Show you on this. So there's a little more. There's lots of stuff you can do with this one. Sorry, neat edge. Lots of stuff you could do with that one. It's a great stitch. And I like this one when I don't want to see the bead holes and I'm not going to do anything else. So this one, I can see the bead holes and I don't necessarily want to look down at the side of my bracelet and see that all the time. So I'll use this edging instead. And it gives you a much cleaner, because you don't see the bead holes. Once it's a whole piece and it goes all the way around, you don't see the bead holes. And then I have a rolled edge, which can be done, you know, all kinds of different fashions. You can start with 5, go to 7, then 9, and then 11, and then, you know, you got the point. Up and down and make it. Okay, so you can have as much fun, even with this brick stitch here. You can actually brick on top of your brick stitch. So I could actually come in, you know, how you do normal brick stitch, where you come up from underneath. I would be coming up through this bead. So this is still on the side of a bracelet or side of a piece of jewelry or a side of whatever, and I'm just folding this over to use this thread. So you normally do a brick stitch, you can start with 2, and then you go through the bridge, your first bridge, Obviously it's not coming up from the right place. And I have another bead beside it that's kind of tight, but oh, come on. Not the way to start a brick stitch, but we're going to pretend. Okay, so I'd done the two, and then I would just do one between each one. And you could do layers. And this is often seen on traditional work because what you'll have is you'll have a pattern of beads in that brick stitch. So it's like 4 rows high, but you'll have color change. And you'll see that on some traditional pieces. Forgot about that one. So this is, brick stitch edging where you do multi-layers. So you can do as many layers as you want, making, you could do a chevron pattern or a TP pattern, with colors, because I don't have another colors here right now, but you could definitely use colors. And you would just, when you're laying out your beads at the bottom, you'd do 1, 2, and then let's say an orange, and then a red and a white, and you know what I mean? And then when you came back, you would just put it beside it. It's a matter of spacing, but that's a complicated video. It could be a video all by itself on how to do that particular fancy brick stitching. And I can show you on a pair of earrings easier than on a piece of stiffened felt. So I hope this helps you. I hope that you just cut this thread. I hope this helps you to sort of see all the possibilities of the things that you can do. And I know it's a hot mess right now, but I was trying to teach you different ways, different things you can do to fancy up your bead embroidery pieces, your leather pieces, your brick stitch, even if you're doing brick stitch pieces themselves, and what you can do on the outside of a brick stitch piece, for bead embroidery. Bead weaving, sorry. You make a brick stitch piece, and then you can do fun stuff on the outside of a brick stitch piece. It doesn't have to be just a brick stitch piece. So just know there's lots of possibilities of things you can do. I hope you have fun experimenting. I'd love to see pictures. Please friend me on Facebook if you wish, and you're more than welcome to post what you've made from my videos. Yeah, and take care and keep on making from Annie's Makings. Bye.